and welcome to this video log with me, Wayne, from swimmingcyclingrunning.com. Well, today I'm giving you 3 absolutely cast iron big reasons why you should use one of these. And that's a Stryd power meter for running. Before we begin, please subscribe to the channel and like the video if you find it useful. Also hit that bell so you get notified every single time we upload a video. Now those are big reasons because there are lots of little reasons along the way that we're going to add, but they're not the main part. There are 3 main reasons. Now I'm coming from running as someone who hated it when I was young. When I saw an advert for the first London Triathlon, I thought, there's my next challenge, because I like swimming, I like cycling, but running I've never wanted to do in distance. I'd play squash and tennis and things like that for hours, but I wouldn't go out for a run. Now, a few of you might be using cycle power meters, but a lot of you might not know what power is and how it relates to what we're doing. So we're just going to go to the computer and have a look at a power equation that we can use to start seeing what things we might be able to improve our running.
Okay, so we really need a definition of power, and we can call power P equal to force F times speed S. Now importantly, in both cycling and in running, this speed is actually the rate at which we apply the force, not the speed you're going forward, and we call that cadence. In cycling, it's fairly easy. Cadence is the number of complete revolutions the pedals do in 1 minute. In running, we've got 2 options. Either we can count the number of times both feet hit the ground, and that's called revolutions per minute, or we can count the number of times each foot hits the ground, and that's called steps per minute. So now, as individuals and coaches, we have something we can really work with, because if you want to increase power over time, what we have to do is either increase force over time, or we can increase speed over time, or we can increase both at the same time.
Now I've been using a power meter for months, trying to learn what my body's doing, how it reacts, and actually just seeing the statistics it gives me. And one thing that's really helped me is a book by Jim Vance here, The Power Project. And that is probably a Bible for running with power and how to analyze it and what you can potentially do to improve yourself with a power meter.
Running at any particular power level has an energy requirement associated with it, so it's really useful to note how much power any increase in speed actually costs us. If we draw a graph with power on one axis and speed on the other, we can actually plot the power requirement for speed. So for a given increase in speed at low speeds, we actually only need a very little amount of power to actually increase it. But the same increase in speed at higher speeds costs us inexorably more in terms of power. And that's very useful to know in both our training and our racing.
Another thing that it's very important to understand is what happens to power output over time. In other words, as we increase the time we're exercising or running in this case, what happens to the power we can hold for that particular level? Again, let's go to the computer so we can explain it.
Now a really useful thing to know would be how much power we can actually output over a period of time. And if you draw a graph with power on one axis and time on the other, we can actually map our power that we'll be able to output over time. Now you'll note for really high power outputs, we can actually only keep that going for a very short time period, such as sprinting. But there will be a power point that we can keep going for a whole 60 minutes. And that's 1 hour of running, and that point we call our run functional threshold power. Now, Stryd actually call that our critical power, but at points above that power level, we can keep it going for less than 60 minutes, and points below that power level, we can keep it going for more than 60 minutes. But that actually is calculable. We can calculate the power we need and the amount of time we can actually keep it going.
Okay, so now we've got a basic understanding of power and how it relates to both speed and time. We can get to our first massive reason why a power meter is the best thing to improve your running, and that is accuracy. Power meters are accurate the moment you do something. Now, a lot of you might use heart rate, and the heart rate is not necessarily accurate. It's affected by lots of things. For a start, it does tend to have to be reactive. Once you do something, it takes a while for the heart to say, hang on a second, we're doing something, let's go along. If there's heat, you might be affected. If you're slightly ill, it might be affected. All of these things can affect your heart rate that don't affect the power output. The power output is what you're actually doing today. It actually says, this is what I'm doing, not this is how my body is reacting to what I'm doing. We're going to go to the computer. I'm going to use an example of the run I've done to test this power meter for you later on. And we'll just look at a couple of things there to actually explain the difference between heart rate and power, and you can look at that visually.
Here we are on my Stryd Power Center profile page. I'm not going to do much with this now because we're interested in heart rate versus power. So we're going to go to a particular run that I've done, and this run I did is the test run I did for this particular vlog. Now this is 200 meter intervals, and I'm going to highlight 4 of those 200 meter intervals just here. Now, currently it's showing elevation, which we don't need. I'm on a treadmill. We're showing pace. It was all even pace, so I don't need that. And what we're interested in is heart rate versus power. Now, I'm just going to move this line to there, which is where I think I started the run, if you look. And we see at 14 minutes 39 seconds, I started the run. And the peak of heart rate is happening at 14:59. That's fully 20 seconds after my power increase. My heart rate is actually following. When I stop running that 200 meters, you can see my heart rate only slowly goes down. And then once again, when I start running, which is about 17:03, it takes to this peak, I think, before my heart rate effectively catches up, which is 18 seconds. So there's a huge lag between what my power is doing and my heart rate. This is walking at 4 kilometers an hour. That's just a recovery period, and my heart rate just isn't showing that. So if, for example, you were working on pace and kept the same pace going into a hill, it's going to take 10 to 20 seconds for your heart rate to actually follow that. That's 10 to 20 seconds when you're actually putting out a lot more power than you should be putting out, and you're reducing effectively the amount of energy you have left, perhaps at the end of a race.
Okay, so that's one out the way. Very big thing, accuracy. Accuracy is hugely important. Now, if you've used a cycle power meter, you'll know that it's very two-dimensional. It works in one plane, and that's the plane of the chainring. It can look at the power you're putting out at any particular point on that plane, but what it can't do is it can't tell you if you're actually cycling efficiently or inefficiently. It has no tools to do that. A power meter for running is slightly different. So let's go to the computer and see how a power meter for cycling and a power meter for running differ.
Now, cycle power meters are very two-dimensional. They only tell us the power being used in the actual direction that the pedals are going. Running power meters, on the other hand, takes us into a new dimension. See, when we're running, we have 3 planes of motion. We're going horizontally forwards, and that's the direction we want to go in, but we also have a vertical component that's lifting us up off the ground, and a lateral component that's moving us sideways, normally when we're going from foot to foot. Now, obviously, we want to minimize our vertical motion and maximize our horizontal motion while moving laterally the minimum we possibly can. And all of those things can be told to us with a power meter. So that's incredibly useful information to help us move forward as efficiently as possible.
So a running power meter actually measures 3 different measurements of power. It measures the horizontal power going forward, which is where we want to go, but upwards and sideways as well. And judging those can actually lead to a huge improvement in our running, and that's our second massive reason for using a power meter: efficiency. Now, we can judge efficiency through a power meter in various ways, and each of those ways is calculable, and run by run you can actually assess those and improve them over time through your training. Now let's go to the computer and have a look at those ways, and then we'll come back and actually do an experiment to see what we can do.
Exactly what measurements can a power meter make to help us become more efficient runners? Well, in running, there's lots of things you can be efficient about, but the first thing we talked about was cadence. Now remember, if speed increases, power increases, or you need less force to produce the same power. So we naturally want that to increase. Form power. Now this is all wasted power that doesn't actually move us forward. And we want that obviously to go down. Next thing is leg spring stiffness. Now muscles can act like a spring, you'll actually use less muscle power. It's like a bouncing ball. As it comes down, it builds power and loads power and releases it on the way up. And we naturally want leg spring stiffness to go up because we want to spring. Next, ground contact time. Now with your foot on the ground, you can't be moving forward. So we clearly want ground contact time to reduce. Lastly, vertical oscillation. Now although we have to get our foot off the ground, we actually don't want to move up and down, we want to move forwards. So we want vertical oscillation to go down.
So there's all those variables we can look at that add to the value of a power meter. But overall, they add up to efficiency. We're judging efficiency. And if you can improve your efficiency, you're going to become a better runner or a runner who can just last for longer. Now, to test these, I did an experiment on myself running on a treadmill. And when you do an experiment, you want to change one variable only and see what else changes because of that one variable. And because I only want to do one variable, I set the experiment up a particular way. Now, after a 1.2k warm-up, I did a little stretching and then I was going to use this. It's called a tempo trainer and it sets out a number of beats per minute. You can actually see the experiment whilst I'm doing this. Now you can hear that that's beating at a fast rate. That's 180 beats per minute. So after my warm-up, I did 200 meters at my normal cadence, which is generally around 160. I then put the tempo trainer on a headband so that I could run then hitting this beat, which was at 180 steps per minute. I then did that 5 complete times. Now, I kept it at a low pace. I'm just below 10 kilometers per hour. And the reason I've chosen that is because I do not want fatigue to affect the results of the experiment. So the experiment is purely looking at the change of cadence between my normal run cadence and the one that I'm inputting into my head, 180 steps per minute. And remember that power equals force times speed, and that speed is cadence. So what I've effectively done is I've just changed the speed element of that power equation. Okay, that experiment done, let's look at the statistics. Now we're looking at the statistics on the Stryd Power Center, which is part of their website. Now everyone who buys a Stryd power meter is allocated a slot on that power center and can view their statistics. And the reason I'm looking at that is because although you can look at it on Training Peaks and Golden Cheetah and things like that, everyone gets this for free, so you don't have to spend any extra money to get these wonderful statistics. Okay, so let's look at that and then we'll come back and assess.
We're back looking at the test run that I did for this particular vlog, and we're going to get rid of elevation, we're going to get rid of pace. I'm just going to really concentrate on the first 2 of these particular segments. Now I can highlight each segment and get the figures for each second, but remember the pace is always the same. So cadence, we know, is going to change. When I'm walking it's really slow and I'm trying to run at my normal pace, and then I'm making sure I go close to 180 steps per minute. So we know that's going up. Let's get rid of that. We'll miss heart rate, go to form power. Now remember, form power is that power which is not going towards making us run forward. So we want that to go down, and effectively you can see from one to the other it actually does. Ground contact time, remember we want that to go down as well. Now it's difficult to see here, but you will see later that that actually does go down on every single run. Leg spring stiffness we want to go up because we want to be bouncing off of our muscles and connective tissue as opposed to using our muscle power. And vertical oscillation, well, we want that to go down. We want my head to be more level as opposed to bouncing up and down. and we can see that that's happening too. Now if we transfer all those individual 200 meters over to a spreadsheet, we can actually look at that and analyze the results. So here's the spreadsheet, and I just put pace and time into there so that you can actually see that every single one was done at around the same pace and the time was exactly the same for each. I'm actually now going to hide those because we don't need them, and we're going to look at the data. Now the first thing to look at is cadence. Remember, I was running at my normal pace and then I was trying to run at 180 steps per minute, and that's what effectively I'm doing. But as you can see, as I go through, my normal pace has actually risen from 162 to 165, which is an interesting change in just such a short time. But the every second one has been done at 180. Now if you look at average power, that's the power I'm using to run at that particular pace. We're going from 215 to 208, that's a saving of 7. 214 to 210, that's a saving of 4. 214 to 206, saving of 8. 212 to 207, saving of 5. 211 to 205, saving of 6. In terms of form power, remember this is wasted energy or power that's not going to run forward. We want that to go down. We've got 78 72, that's a saving of 6. 78 72, saving of 6. 76, nearly 77, 71, that's a saving of 5 to 6. 76 70, that's a saving of 6. 76 70, that's a saving of 6. Heart rate effectively levels out towards the end. Initially I start high and then it goes effectively around the 130 mark, although to run at 180 steps per minute is slightly higher than running at my normal pace. Ground contact time, again, we want that to go down. Remember, if your foot's on the ground, you cannot be running. So 266 to 245, 263, 247, 266, 252, 266, 252, 267, 254. Now notice I'm actually on the ground more towards the end than I was at the beginning. That's showing some fatigue, so slight lack of form. Leg spring stiffness, we're going 12.5, 14.9. That is what we want to see, an increase in leg spring stiffness, and that happens all the way through. Vertical oscillation, in other words how much my head is moving up and down, 7.8, 6.3, 7.7, 6.2, 7.46. Every single time I'm actually more level with my head than I was before. Now the last column is not a figure that was in that, it's efficiency index. Now efficiency index I've taken to be what Jim Vance does in his book The Power Project as meters per minute divided by average power, and because I want to be able to compare with other things, I've actually multiplied that by 100. So efficiency index on the slow run, 76, we want it to go up, 78, 76, 78, 76, 79, 77, 79, 77 and 80. So in every single fast cadence run, I am more efficient than I was on the slow cadence run. Now if you find things easier to look at graphically, we'll take a look at this graph here. Blue is average power, and we want average power to go down for the same pace. So we have up, down, up, down, up, down. You can see that is exactly the case. Form power, remember we want form power to go down, that's wasted power. So we're up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down. Ground contact time, we want that again to go down every time, and you see up, down, up, down, up, down, and that's quite dramatic, I think, that particular one. That might just be the scale that it's on. Heart rate, that we really would like to go down over time. One particular run is not doing it, but it starts high, levels out, and then continues to be level. It's getting more level the more I practice running at 180 steps a minute. In this graph, I've isolated leg spring stiffness and vertical oscillation. Now remember, leg spring stiffness is that spring in your step. So we want to be more springy as we go along. And the low cadence, high cadence, low cadence, high cadence. Every time we go to high cadence, we are actually increasing our leg spring stiffness. In terms of vertical oscillation, we want our head to stay as level as possible if we can. So we've got high, low, high, low, high, low. And again, that's exactly the pattern we want to see if we are actually improving our efficiency. Lastly, let's look at cadence versus efficiency index. And you see cadence is in blue, efficiency index. Remember, I've multiplied this by 100 just to get comparable figures. Cadence low, high, low, high, low, high, and efficiency lower every time we reduce our cadence.
Now I know that if I gave everyone out there a tool that was guaranteed to improve their efficiency in their swimming, people would be biting my hand off to get it. Here, I've just actually proven that I can improve 5 aspects of my running efficiency by using one thing and measuring it using a power meter. Remember, my form power improved, my leg spring stiffness improved, my ground contact time improved, my vertical oscillation improved, and lastly, that efficiency index, and remember efficiency index is meters per minute over average power, that improved too. Everything improved. So I can now, in my training, look at all those factors and slowly but surely try to come to 180 steps per minute naturally. I can then try and increase my force, muscular force, and muscular endurance to yet again get more benefits in terms of efficiency and using power better. So the third reason, the third massive reason, we're down to that now, is mentality. One of my favourite sayings is, whether you think you can or think you can't, you're probably right. And as a coach, I'm trying to get people to the start line thinking that they can. Because if you think you can, you find it a lot easier to actually achieve your aim and ambition than if you think, oh, I'm not so sure. So once again, going to go to the computer and just have a look at why a power meter might give us that confidence, both in our training and our racing, to achieve something we haven't necessarily yet achieved. And we're talking about, remember, any level of runner whatsoever.
Let's go back to the graph we had comparing power over time. We're drawing our 2 axes. Remember, y is power and x is time, and we'll draw in the graph. We're going to add an axis, and this axis we're going to call speed, and we're going to draw in the graph of the speed we can hold over time. Now, originally we drew in that 60-minute line, and that gave us a point on the power axis that we called our run functional threshold power. We now have a line on the speed line that we can call our run functional threshold pace. That's the pace we can hold for 1 hour. Now let's redraw that 60-minute line in. If we take a time less than 60 minutes, let's say 25 minutes, which is round about here, we get another 2 points of speed and power. Now let's say that speed is 12 kilometers an hour and the wattage is 250 watts. It means if I hold 250 watts for 25 minutes, I'm going to cover 5 kilometers. So I now know my 5 kilometer pace. Equally out here, there's a point at about the 240 minute mark, 4 hours, that's going to give me another 2 points of pace and power. Let's say the pace is 10.5 kilometers an hour and the power is 195 watts. It means if I hold 195 watts for 240 minutes, I will cover the distance of 42 kilometers, which is a full marathon. Now, knowing those paces is absolutely massive because it's accurate. I know if I hold that wattage for either 25 minutes or 240 minutes, that's exactly what I'm going to output, assuming everything else remains the same.
And the power meter can make our training very specific. If we know we're going to be running for 4.5 hours and we've got to do a particular level of power for that time to hit our target, then we can practice that level of power in our training. We can do other things, but we can practice that level of power and drill that into our brain. As our functional threshold power or critical power improves, that might change. But that's just improving the statistics. It's not changing the principle of what we're doing. We can really be specific in our training to train for the event we're looking at. If we're training for a 5K, we're going to be training well above our functional threshold power or critical power. And if we're training for a marathon or an Ironman, we're training below our functional threshold power or critical power. And all of this gives us the confidence to know that when we come to race day, We hold those numbers. If we do that for that time and we've practiced the differences on the course, etc., in our training, then we will hit our target. Now, those 3 reasons are not the only reasons to obtain a Stryd power meter. You can start dialing in intensity into your workouts, and that intensity will give you potential fatigue levels. Over time, that will give you your fitness level and your readiness to race. But if you're a multi-sport athlete, you actually need to take all of your sports into account. And if you're doing any cross training or any other type of sport apart from running, you also need to take that into account to correctly identify your fatigue and your fitness and your readiness to race. So for me, the 3 biggies are the ones that I've said. So there we have it. 3 massive reasons why you should be using a power meter, no matter what your level of running in either running or triathlon. So I put a link below to Stryd. You can actually look at them and buy a power meter for yourself. Remember, if you do buy one, don't just look at the power numbers on your watch or your phone immediately. You have to learn what that's telling you about your body. If you've got a coach, let them look at it for a short while, then react to it. You don't know what your body's going to do with power until you've used it for a little time. Definitely a few weeks. Okay, that's all for this week. Next week we're going out to Sal, so hopefully we'll be bringing you something in the sunshine and perhaps even some open water swimming. Enjoy your racing, enjoy your training, but above all, keep well.